Neverwinter Nights versus Baldur's Gate. That's what we're jumping into with this vlog and exploring the question, the similarities and the differences of these two fantastic games. If you had to tackle one before the other, or based on your player personality, the type of D&D experience you're looking for, would one be better suited than the other? Now, of course, the easy question of this vlog would be both. They're both a lot of fun. They both leverage unique strengths, and being D&D, even though they're different systems. Baldur's Gate is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons' second rule set, and Neverwinter Nights, of course, being D&D 3.5, 3.x, 3.0 differences, but the classic characters, great NPCs, magic items, and of course the monsters, the classic D&D monsters. Now, jumping into this vlog, absolutely no spoilers. So wherever you are, whether you're starting the journey, continuing the journey, I'm not going to give anything away, but we're going to talk a little bit about the background between the two games. So at its core, yes, there's an amazing story going on. Yes, there's heroics, there's NPCs, there's side quests, but at its core, this D&D experience being digital, it's a combat engine. Combat is the focus of the game, and combat that scales up at the focus of the game. The first aspect of the game that you'll notice between the two is, and when I say Baldur's Gate, I'm talking about BG1, I'm putting Siege in there, it is, and Baldur's Gate 2 and the extension on 2. For Neverwinter Nights, we're talking about the entire campaign, the secondary campaigns, and a lot of the modules, the premium modules that you can get to download. We're kind of lumping all of those in there. For the most part, the encounters of Baldur's Gate tend to operate under the assumption that you have a party, a true D&D type experience. You can play solo. You can play with just one or two party members, absolutely. But this idea of a party means the encounters tend to be more numerous and involve a lot more monsters, a lot more to control, especially we get into Siege and other aspects of the game. Part of that's the balance. Part of that's just the combat engine, where when you jump into Neverwinter Nights, it's under the assumption that you're playing one character, maybe an NPC, single NPC, probably a single NPC, and some summons. Or you're playing with your friends. Neverwinter Nights at its inception was not so much a D&D adventure, but a tool set or an online DM experience. So the true aspect of that game is playing with multiple players or a DM kind of running that server. So the combats tend to be a lot smaller, only thrown more at you. So the pace of the combat kind of changes a little bit. I find, even after playing through both games a lot, again, no spoilers, some of the combats are a little bit more intense in Baldur's Gate because you're micromanaging or managing your party. That could be a little bit challenging, and it takes really focusing on an individual character in that moment a little bit harder, because I've got to click here, cast my spell, click here, move over there, click here, hide in shadows, click here, attack, click here, drink a potion, where when you're playing Neverwinter Nights, you can kind of tend to focus on you, the primary character. So I can click and cast this spell and move here and do this. I find things are a little bit more immersive with Neverwinter Nights. But being a combat engine, there's a lot of great combats. Now, the story itself, and I have to be careful because I don't know where you are in either game. The story in Baldur's Gate, you have a very unique background, a very unique heritage. And that plays out in the background story. Some people like that. Some people don't like that. You have freedom of character class and selection, but you don't really have freedom of your background. Where Neverwinter Nights, the core module and the other premium modules and the expansion modules, you're just a regular adventurer. You find yourself more going up against the forces of history and the choices that you make. I feel a little bit more at home and comfort playing that type of adventure because I can get into the character a little bit more. I don't want to say mercenary, but a character of the historical times that I find myself. But again, there's lots of side quests and there's lots of different things to explore. For me, the two biggest differences comes down to skills and character classes. Now, Baldur's Gate, with the expansion, the enhanced version at this point, you have a lot more character classes to pick and select from. And yes, of course, they're taking character classes from AD&D, a role-playing and RPG rule set, and they're trying to interject them into a game engine. So not every class, certain classes are more powerful than others. Certain classes, they've tried to replicate the D&D experience. They might have missed 1 or 2 points. Some of the druid subclasses, which would flow easier on regular tabletop. But you have a lot more choices. When you come over to Neverwinter Nights being the D&D 3.x engine, there's this idea, here are your base classes, and here are the prestige classes. That was kind of the thing in 3.5. Yes, you could multi-class, what you would call an AD&D kind of dual class, but the idea was you're going to take levels in the base class, and then you're going to specialize and be a prestige class when you meet certain requirements. It falls apart a little bit because you don't have as many prestige classes as you do subclasses with Baldur's Gate, but also Neverwinter Nights being a combat engine and being about efficiency, because you have to combat your way through things. Yes, there's some dialogue options and spell effects and clickies, but you have to combat your way through, especially some of the harder encounters. I find that they're not necessary. You don't have to play the prestige classes. And when you do, yeah, it makes things a little more interesting, but and I love Shadow Dancer, but there's nothing like groundbreaking there. I love Dragon Disciple, Red Dragon Disciple, but nothing overly groundbreaking. So from that perspective, there is more variety, more to explore in the Baldur's Gate character class tool set than there is Neverwinter Nights. Now, where Neverwinter Nights gets a little bit interesting, AD&D has some minor skill checks in it. For the most part, attributes or certain things hard-coded into the game where, no spoilers, if you have a higher charisma or a higher something or a certain character class with insights, you'll get more dialogue options. Where Neverwinter Nights, being based on the 3.5 game engine, it's all about the skill checks. So you tend to have more bluffs. You tend to have more intimidates. You can take some of the interesting skills like taunt or tumble or some of the disarm and other type of skills, even if you're not a fighter type class, if you meet the attributes and you have the points in it. This gets things interesting where they're not groundbreaking. They're not going to win you the game, but it opens up some funner options. It opens up some more interesting stuff in combat, outside of combat, other than like click, attack, click, attack, click, attack. So from that perspective, that's where Neverwinter Nights tends to play itself out a little bit better. The final piece, and this certainly is not a criticism, it's not even really fair to compare, but it is something worth to mention. My play experience is on a tablet, but mostly on a phone, as crazy as that is. To have Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights in my pocket is really something neat. The interface for Neverwinter Nights and Baldur's Gate, the redesign absolutely works. It's just easier. It's cleaner. There's some auto things to do from that perspective. And I find the interface is cleaner in being one character primarily that I'm playing. And you can kind of tell the NPC what to do. But from that perspective, I find the game easier to play and immerse myself, where, again, Baldur's Gate is a little bit more of a tactical combat kind of micromanaging type thing, unless you're playing solo, but then you miss out on the NPCs. That's the primary breakdown. I can go further, and I would go further based on quests and story interaction and NPCs, but I can't do that for this vlog because that would be giving away some important spoiler points that I really want you to discover for yourself. But again, the easy question is, pick them both up. It's D&D. They're both great. Start with one, play through it, then work your way through the other. And as for which one you start first, they're both really amazing experiences to play.